Hey everyone, welcome back to another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
This week we're
Looking at
we've got a stack of papers here. This week's paper is all about cannabis research.
a great roundup.
Think of it as your green table talk cheat sheet for all the cannabis buzz out there.
For all the canna curious folks out
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
This is the stuff you want to know.
And we've got papers on everything from sleep and CBD to
The ECS.
the endocannabinoid system,
Deep dive on the ECS.
which is like our body's own internal cannabis network.
Exactly.
So
It's a really fascinating collection of studies this week,
it is.
spanning a range of journals and research groups.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a good snapshot of where things are headed in cannabis science.
Yeah, and don't worry, we're not going to bombard you with,
Health scientific jargon.
dry scientific jargon.
Well,
We're here to break it all down
give you,
and give you the juiciest bits,
yeah,
the benefits, the risks.
it's things that are practically relevant.
Yeah, the things that make even the most skeptical cannabis enthusiasts go.
That's interesting. I think there are some real eyebrow raisers in this stack of papers.
There are some eyebrow raisers this week.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
First up, a study from Neuropsychopharmacology,
Oh,
2024, by Arnold and his team.
Mm-hmm.
They were looking at CBN,
CBN
that lesser-known cannabinoid that's gaining traction as
as a sleep aid.
sleep aid.
A lot of people swear by it.
Right. A lot of people are saying, oh, CBN helps me sleep.
But this study
Does it?
put it to the test
Yeah, they actually put it to the test.
in lab.
They didn't just ask people how they felt after taking CBN.
Yeah.
They used this fancy technique
Called polysomnography.
to measure brain waves
Mm.
and track different sleep stages in rats. Think of it as like a super detailed sleep tracker.
Yeah, like they were really looking at the architecture of sleep.
Ooh, I like that.
Architecture of sleep.
So we're talking hard data.
Hard day.
Not just anecdotal reports of, I slept like a baby.
Exactly.
So what did they find?
Well,
What happened to the rats?
CBN significantly increased both NREM and REM sleep time in the rats.
What's NREM?
So NREM sleep is...
Is that the dreaming sleep?
No, NREM is that deep restorative sleep.
Uh-oh.
And REM is where the dreaming happens.
Oh,
So it increased both.
Also, it increased both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interestingly,
Okay.
the effect of CBN on NREM sleep was comparable to zolpidem.
What's Zolpidem?
Zolpidem is
Like Ambien.
Ambien. Yeah.
Oh, so it's a prescription sleep medication.
Exactly. It's a very common prescription sleep medication.
So the CBN was basically going head to head with a pharmaceutical.
Yeah, they were neck and neck.
Wow. Okay.
Head to head.
So the Zolpidem,
Yeah, zolpidem.
did that impact REM sleep?
No, it didn't.
Interesting.
So it really just impacted NREM.
So maybe the CBN is more broad.
Yeah, this suggests that CBN might have a broader effect on sleep architecture,
Right.
influencing both deep sleep and dreaming.
Okay, so far so good for CBN.
Yeah.
But before I go swapping my chamomile tea for a CBN nightcap,
Right.
what's the catch?
There are a couple things to keep in mind.
Oh, yeah.
First, as with any animal study,
Okay.
we have to be cautious about extrapolating the results directly to humans.
Right.
So rat sleep might not be a perfect mirror for human sleep.
Yeah, fair enough.
Dosage always matters.
Right, especially with cannabis.
Especially with cannabis.
Yeah.
The doses they used in this study were quite high,
Okay.
equivalent of about 100 milligrams for a 60-kilogram human.
Okay, 100 milligrams.
And here's where it gets even trickier.
Okay.
Oral CBN has low bioavailability,
What does that mean?
meaning your body doesn't absorb it as easily.
Okay.
So you'd likely need even more CBN to get the same effect they saw in the rats.
Okay, so if I'm looking for a sleep aid,
Right.
those 5 milligram CBN gummies I see at the dispensary,
Yeah.
maybe not strong enough.
Probably not if you're aiming for the kind of sleep benefits they saw in this study. So it's important to pay attention to dosage.
Mm-hmm.
And remember that what works for a rat might not translate perfectly to a human.
It's always the caveat.
Always
Always a
with
caveat.
the rat studies.
Yeah.
But it's exciting to see some science backing up those anecdotal claims about CBN and sleep.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction.
And here's another interesting tidbit from this study.
Okay.
They found that a CBN metabolite called 11-hydroxy-CBN,
11 what?
11-hydroxy-CBN,
Okay.
was present in the rat's brains at levels similar to CBN itself.
Okay.
Now, a metabolite is what your body creates after breaking down a substance.
Just kind of like a byproduct.
Exactly, a byproduct.
Okay.
And this particular byproduct, this 11-hydroxy-CBN,
Mm-hmm.
also seemed to be influencing sleep.
Really?
And in fact, it's even more active at CB1 receptors.
CB1 receptors.
Yeah, which are those key players in the endocannabinoid system
Okay.
than CBN itself.
So the sleep effect we're seeing
Might not just be from CBN,
solely from CBN.
but from this metabolite.
It could be this metabolite.
Whoa, talk about a plot twist.
Yeah, a little twist.
Yeah.
It highlights the complexity of cannabis research.
Yeah.
Not just dealing with single compounds. We're
Right.
dealing with a whole orchestra of them interacting in different ways.
So the takeaway for our listeners
Yeah,
is this CBN sleep connection is worth exploring,
definitely worth exploring.
but dosage and product quality are crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
Right.
Keep an eye out for future research on 11
11.
hydroxy-CBN.
Hydroxy-CBN.
It seems like this unexpected player might be stealing the show.
Right. This could be the thing that's really doing it,
Yeah.
not the CBN itself.
We don't know.
Wow. Okay.
More research is needed.
More research is needed.
But it's definitely fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It's amazing how one study can open up so many new avenues for investigation.
And speaking of opening up new avenues, let's shift gears to a study that looked at who's using CBD and why.
Okay.
This one's from Cho and their team, published in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And this study uncovered some interesting trends.
Yeah.
They found that CBD use is surprisingly common,
Yeah.
particularly among
Older adults.
older adults.
Like way more common than we might think.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, in the 65 plus age group,
65 plus.
more people reported using CBD than cannabis itself.
Wow, that's pretty surprising.
It is surprising.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like,
Is my grandma
Yeah.
secretly sipping CBD tea?
instead of Earl Grey.
Right,
Yeah.
instead of her usual Earl Grey.
Exactly.
But seriously, why do you think that is?
Well, it's hard to say for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
but it's likely that older adults perceive CBD as having a lower risk profile compared to cannabis.
Okay.
And they might also be drawn to its potential wellness benefits.
Mhm.
Remember, CBD is often marketed for managing pain,
Yeah.
anxiety, and sleep issues,
Right, all things that are
all of which
more common as we age.
become more common as we age. Exactly.
Right, maybe they're just trying to stay ahead of the aches and pains.
Could be.
Right.
Could be.
The study also found a link between CBD use and cannabis use in general, right?
That's right. In people aged 50 and older, there was a significant positive correlation between using CBD and using cannabis, both for medical and non-medical reasons.
So if someone is already using cannabis,
Right.
perhaps for a medical condition,
Mm-hmm.
they might be more likely to incorporate CBD into their routine as well.
That's what the data suggests, yeah.
Interesting.
It's fascinating to see how these different cannabinoids are being used in combination.
It also raises an interesting question. Are older adults turning to CBD as a form of self-treatment
Yeah, that's a good question.
because they lack adequate medical guidance?
Yeah,
Or perhaps don't fully trust traditional medicine?
that's a really important question and one that deserves more attention. It makes you think about the role of education and access to reliable information, especially for older populations who might be less familiar with cannabis and its various compounds.
Then it connects back to our first study, too.
It does.
Maybe this growing interest in CBD and CBN among older adults is driving the research into their potential for sleep and other age-related issues.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the science is playing catch up.
Yeah, the science is catching up to what people are already experiencing and experimenting with.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really interesting trend.
Now, for all you skeptics out there,
Here we go.
we've got a study that tackles a very controversial topic,
Okay.
cannabis and cognitive decline.
Ooh, big one.
This one comes from Oakholm and colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
published in Brain and Behavior in 2024.
Okay.
And it challenges the long-held gateway drug theory
Yeah.
that suggests cannabis use leads to harder drug use and cognitive impairment.
Right.
So this was a massive study following over 5,000 men in Denmark for an average of 44 years.
44 years.
That's a long time.
They measured their intelligence when they were around 20 years old,
Okay.
and then again at around 64,
Mm-hmm.
using the same test.
Wow, that's a lot of data points and a really long follow-up period.
So they weren't just looking at short-term effects. They were tracking these guys for decades.
Decades.
That definitely adds weight to the findings.
For sure.
What did they discover?
Well, the results were quite surprising.
Lay it on me.
The men who used cannabis actually showed less cognitive decline over time compared to the non-users.
Less decline.
Less decline.
That seems to fly in the face of the gateway drug theory.
It does indeed.
What's even more interesting
What's even more interesting
is that neither the age at which they started using cannabis nor the frequency of use was linked to worse cognitive decline.
Exactly.
So it's not like starting younger or using more frequently led to more cognitive problems.
Nope.
That's pretty significant.
It is significant.
But of course, every study has its limitations. In this case, it's important to note that the study only included men.
Right.
So we can't generalize the findings to women.
Right.
And even with a study this large,
Yeah.
we can't rule out other factors that could have played a role.
Right. We can't say for certain
Genetics,
lifestyle, environmental influences.
Yeah, it's a complex equation.
It's a very complex equation.
But it's encouraging to see research challenging these negative stereotypes.
Yeah.
You know?
From a pro-cannabis perspective,
Yeah.
this study provides more ammunition for advocating responsible use and recognizing that cannabis affects each person differently.
Exactly.
It really underscores the need for personalized approaches to cannabis use.
I agree.
All right, time to level up our cannabis knowledge with a little ECS 101.
ECS 101.
Our next source isn't a single study.
Okay.
It's a review paper by McPartland and their team, published in PLOS 1 back in 2014.
PLOS 1.
And it's all about the endocannabinoid system.
The ECS.
Or ECS.
This review is a great reminder
Yeah.
that the ECS is so much more than just THC and CBD receptors.
It is so much more.
It's like our body's internal cannabis system.
Exactly.
And it's involved in regulating a whole host of functions.
Mood and pain.
From mood and pain to sleep and appetite. So it's like a master regulator, keeping things in balance.
Keeping things in balance, yeah.
Think of it as a vast network of receptors and chemicals that work together to maintain homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
That sweet spot where our bodies function optimally.
Exactly.
And when we use cannabis, we're essentially interacting with this system, right?
Yeah, we're tapping into that system.
We're tapping in.
We're speaking the same language.
We're speaking the language.
Yeah.
And that's why cannabis can have such diverse effects.
Such diverse effects.
It's not just about getting high.
Right.
It's about modulating this complex system that influences so many different aspects of our physiology.
It's like cannabis is speaking the same language as our bodies, but just with different dialects.
Oh, I like that.
Different dialects.
So it's not just one
That's
word.
right. It's a whole symphony.
There are different
Yeah.
dialects of cannabis.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, this review highlighted some fascinating things about how the ECS can be influenced.
I am all ears. What surprised you?
Well, first of all, the range of things that can impact the ECS is surprisingly broad.
Really?
They found evidence that pharmaceuticals like painkillers, antidepressants,
Okay.
and even anti-anxiety medications can affect the ECS.
So even if you've never touched cannabis, your ECS is already being influenced by other things.
It's already being modulated.
That's mind-blowing.
By other things in our environment.
Oh.
And it's not just medications.
Okay.
Lifestyle choices like diet, exercise,
Exercise.
even things like alcohol and coffee can play a role.
Really, alcohol and coffee can impact the ECS. So our everyday habits could be subtly tweaking our internal cannabis system without us even realizing it.
Without us even knowing.
Wow, that's both empowering and a little scary at the same time.
It is. It's a little bit of both.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And this review even found that alternative approaches like acupuncture and massage have the potential to modulate the ECS.
Wow. So many different roads lead to the ECS.
So many different roads.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of our bodies.
It's interconnected.
And how seemingly unrelated things can have a ripple effect.
Exactly. It's all connected.
Yeah.
And it helps explain why cannabis can have such varied effects on different people.
Right.
It's like we all come to the table with a differently tuned ECS shaped by our lifestyle medication use and even our genetics.
That's a great point. It's like everyone has their own unique ECS fingerprint.
ECS fingerprint. I love that.
This makes me wonder if so many things can influence the ECS.
Right.
Tailoring our lifestyle choices?
Support ECS health and maybe even change how we respond to cannabis.
That's a fascinating question.
Right.
And one that's ripe for further research.
Yeah.
You know, if we can crack the code of how these lifestyle factors impact the ECS, we might be able to develop personalized strategies that leverage those pathways
Right.
to achieve therapeutic effects even without using cannabis.
So it's like using our knowledge of the plant to unlock our own healing potential, even if we're not using the plant itself.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is indeed. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities for how we approach health and well-being.
Well, on that note, we'll take a quick pause to let that sink in. When we come back, we'll be tackling those Indica and Sativa labels you see everywhere and dissecting the truth behind the gateway drug theory. Stay with us.
We'll be right back. Welcome back.
So let's talk about those labels you see everywhere, Indica and Sativa.
Oh, yeah.
They're supposed to tell you about the effects you can expect.
Right.
But a new study suggests they might not be as reliable as we think. Yeah, this study published just this year by Sanchez-Teruel and colleagues analyzed over 800 different cannabis varieties.
800?
800.
That's a lot.
Talk about a dream job.
I know, right?
And they found way more variation than just Indica or Sativa.
But for those of us who aren't professional bud tenders,
Right.
what does all that variation really mean?
It comes down to the chemical cocktail in each plant.
Okay.
Cannabis contains hundreds of compounds, including cannabinoids like THC and CBD and terpenes, which are responsible for those delicious aromas and flavors.
Right.
The ratios of these compounds vary widely from one plant to the next.
Okay.
And that's what ultimately influences the effects you'll experience.
So it's got a complex recipe. Different ingredients lead to different outcomes.
Exactly.
And those simple labels aren't capturing that complexity.
Exactly. This study found that simply classifying cannabis based on its THC to CBD ratio, what they call chemotypes, isn't a very accurate way to predict effects.
So Indica and Sativa might not actually tell you much about what a specific product will do to you.
It might not.
That's kind of misleading, isn't it?
It's a good reminder that those labels are more like broad categories than precise indicators.
Sorry?
That's why it's so important to look beyond those labels and dig a little deeper into the chemical profile of your cannabis. What terpenes and cannabinoids are present, and how do they influence your experience? That's where the real insights lie.
It sounds like we need a whole new cannabis vocabulary.
We might.
Instead of asking for indica or sativa, maybe we should be asking for specific terpene profiles or cannabinoid ratios.
I love that idea.
Right.
The more information you have about the chemical makeup of your cannabis, the better equipped you'll be to find products that truly meet your needs and preferences.
Speaking of challenging assumptions, let's address the elephant in the room, the gateway drug theory.
Ooh, a big one.
We've all heard it, cannabis leads to harder drugs, it's a slippery slope, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
We've got a report here from the U.S. Department of Justice, published in 2018.
2018.
That really puts this theory under the microscope.
Interesting.
So what's interesting about this report is that it takes a hard look at the scientific evidence behind the gateway drug theory and finds it lacking.
Yeah.
But we've heard that claim for so long. How can it not be true?
Right.
Isn't it common sense that people who use cannabis are more likely to try other drugs?
Well, this is where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
The report emphasizes that just because some people use cannabis before trying other drugs, it doesn't mean cannabis caused them to use those drugs. Correlation doesn't equal causation.
Oh, so just because two things happen in a sequence, it doesn't mean one caused the other.
Exactly. There could be other factors at play here.
Okay.
Shared genetic predispositions, environmental influences, certain personality traits, all of these things could make someone more likely to experiment with different substances regardless of whether they've used cannabis or not. This report suggests that those shared risk factors might be the real driving force, not cannabis itself.
That makes sense. It's like saying everyone who drinks coffee will eventually drink alcohol.
Right.
Sure, there's some overlap, but it doesn't mean one caused the other. There are probably other reasons why someone might enjoy both.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
It highlights the importance of not jumping to conclusions and looking at the bigger picture.
This is a great reminder for our listeners. Don't just accept headlines at face value. Dig deeper, understand the limitations of research, and form your own informed opinions.
Informed consumers are empowered consumers, and that's what we want, people who can make their own choices based on evidence, not fear or outdated stereotypes.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from sleep and CBD to the ECS and the gateway drug myth. We've even ventured into the complex world of cannabis varieties.
It's a lot.
It's clear that the science is constantly evolving, and there's still so much to learn about this fascinating plant.
It's a really exciting time to be following cannabis research. There's a sense of discovery and a willingness to challenge old dogmas that makes it incredibly dynamic.
I totally agree. Out of everything we've discussed today, what stands out to you as the most surprising or thought-provoking finding?
I think the discovery of that CBN metabolite 11-hydroxy-CBN and its potential role in sleep really caught my attention.
Yeah.
It just reinforces how much we still have to uncover about the intricate ways these compounds interact with our bodies. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's always more to discover.
I'm with you on that one. It's a reminder that we're just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding this plant's potential.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so captivating. We're constantly being surprised by new findings and new possibilities.
So for our listeners out there, how do you think this new information might change their perspective on cannabis? What questions should they be asking themselves as they navigate the ever-expanding world of cannabis products and information?
Well, I hope it encourages them to be more discerning. Consumers don't just rely on those indica or sativa labels. Ask about the specific terpene and cannabinoid profiles of the products they're considering. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to cannabis.
It's about taking control of your experience and making informed choices.
And I think it also highlights the importance of personalized experiences. What works for one person might not work for another. Pay attention to how different strains and products make you feel and use that information to guide your choices. It's about finding what works for your unique body and needs.
It's like cannabis is a conversation, not a monologue. You have to listen to your body and find the strains that resonate with you.
Exactly. And finally, I hope this new information inspires more curiosity and a willingness to challenge long-held beliefs about cannabis. The research is showing us that there's so much more to this plant than we previously thought.
There's always more to learn.
Always more to learn.
And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. We get to uncover new insights, challenge assumptions, and hopefully empower our listeners to be more informed and confident cannabis consumers.
I couldn't agree more. It's a journey of discovery, and I'm excited to see where the science takes us next.
So before we wrap things up, I have one final thought for our listeners to chew on. Given the wide-ranging influence of the ECS, which we talked about earlier, do you think non-cannabis approaches, things like diet, exercise, or even acupuncture, could be equally effective for conditions like insomnia or chronic pain?
That's a really intriguing question. If we can understand how those lifestyle factors impact the ECS, we might be able to develop personalized strategies that leverage those pathways to achieve therapeutic effects, even without using cannabis.
Just like using the knowledge of the plant to unlock our own healing potential. It's a powerful idea to end on.
It is indeed, and it speaks to the interconnectedness of our bodies and the vast potential we have to influence our own health and well-being.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive into the world of cannabis research. We'll see you next time when we'll be exploring. Well, you'll just have to tune in to find out. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay elevated.
It's wild to think how long we've only looked at cannabis in this one limited way.
Right.
And now science is showing us
All these layers.
so many complex connections.
Yeah.
It really feels like we're having a totally different conversation about cannabis now.
Totally.
So for our listeners,
Yeah.
maybe some are just starting to explore cannabis. Some have been using it for years.
Right.
What do you think?
Uh,
How does all this new research change their mindset?
I think it encourages people to be more curious. Like, don't just accept what you hear.
Right.
Whether it's from friends or family or even the bud tender at your local dispensary.
Right.
Like, ask questions.
Yeah.
Do your own research. Really try to understand, like, what's going on beneath the surface.
So it's less about blind faith and more about informed choice.
Exactly.
And that leads me to my second point, personalization.
Mm-hmm.
Cannabis affects everyone differently.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Totally.
And this research is really highlighting that, pay attention to your own unique experience.
It's like finding your cannabis soulmate,
I love that.
the one that just speaks to you.
The strain that speaks to your body and mind in just the right way.
Yeah.
And it's not just about finding the right strain. It's also about understanding how different consumption methods, dosages,
Yeah.
and even your current state of mind can influence your experience.
Yeah. It's like cannabis is a meditation,
Ooh, I like that.
inviting you to be more aware of your internal landscape.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Right.
And finally, I think this new wave of research is really challenging the stigma and misconceptions surrounding cannabis.
Yeah.
It's showing us that this plant has a lot more to offer than just getting high.
It feels like cannabis is graduating from the back alley to the science lab.
I love that.
And it's finally getting the respect it deserves.
Yes, It is, but with that respect.
It was responsibility
Yeah.
to use it wisely and intentionally.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway for all of us.
Right.
Whether we're seasoned cannabis enthusiasts or just dipping our toes into the green waters.
That's it.
Well, before we wrap up this Cannabis Knowledge Fest, I have one last question for you.
Okay, shoot.
We've talked about how the ECS is influenced by so many things, from medication to lifestyle choices.
Right.
Do you think those non-cannabis approaches could be just as effective as cannabis for certain conditions?
That's a really interesting question, and one that I think deserves more attention from the scientific community.
Yeah.
Imagine if we could harness the power of diet exercise, mindfulness, or even acupuncture to tap into the same healing pathways that cannabis activates.
It's like we'd be unlocking our own internal pharmacy
Exactly.
without needing a prescription.
Exactly, and it speaks to the incredible potential we have to influence our own health and well-being.
Yeah. We're not just passive recipients of whatever life throws at us. We have agency. We have choices.
Right.
And we can leverage those choices to create a more balanced and vibrant existence.
That's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cannabis research.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay elevated.